ways you can tell that a band really likes the movie Hellraiser. They use clips, and there's a track called Cenobites. Hi, I'm Cover Killer Nation, and we're here to talk about Aborted's new album, NECROTIC Manifesto. I really like Hellraiser too, by the way, so that is by no means a criticism. In fact, if anything, for me, that's an enhancement. I really enjoy the film series, and I really enjoy Aborted, and really it's been that way for quite some time. These guys have been going at it for a while. It's been almost 2 decades. In fact, I think we're right around the 20-year anniversary, or perhaps it's one that's coming up here in a few years, but either way, it's close enough. With this album, we really needed to see where Aborted was going to kind of head with everything, considering their last few have been pretty solid releases, pretty solid outcomes. However, they really haven't had that big ticket album for quite a while. It's been since the middle part of the 2000s, at least for me. For you guys, that might be something completely and totally different, all depending on whenever you got into the band and what you fell in love with. It's the key thing about music. Sometimes you fall in love with an album that universally is either panned or not really loved all that much, and you have a fierce appreciation for something that perhaps a lot of other people don't, and that's a cool little situation. But with NECROTIC Manifesto, these guys really sound very tight. Now, there's a lot of debate about what some people consider these guys. AllMusic will say that Aborted were pioneers in the death thrash scene, and it's definitely a criticism that I have to agree with. I think that they definitely have paved the way for a lot of bands that have come out afterward. I'm not going to say that they're one of the critical reasons why this happens, but I'm going to accept that criticism as valid. While also you could argue that they've really been able to piece together a lot of great things for the modern metal scene whenever you consider how they sound compared to some of the other bands that have also broken through. But either way, whenever we look at NECROTIC Manifesto from Aborted, it's 14 tracks long, and it's one that definitely has all of the markings of a great death grind album. It definitely has all of the elements that you require. I really enjoy the fact that this is an album where they've really kind of switched things up a good bit every so often. It's not something where they're really going to stray too far away from their trademark sound. However, their approach is somewhat different from track to track, and I think that variety is something that's absolutely critical that you need on an album such as this one, because the uncompromising brutality factor is certainly one that's going to gain you a lot of support, not to mention keep a lot of people that are really fierce fans of the subgenre really interested in your album. However, whenever you're able to parse together a couple of different and new and kind of creative ideas, even if it's something as simple as really lowering your voice, whether it be in a death metal growl or even just speaking, and really translating something that way, it really makes a huge difference, simply because the atmosphere itself gains a different real feel to it, whether it be one that has more of a dark and sinister feel, or one that really gives the feel a little bit more of an insanity, a crazy sensation, something that really just argues that there are many sides of darkness and many sides of madness, and it's certainly one thing that Aborted does tend to do very well. However, it is something that on this album I feel that they did a lot better than perhaps on some others. Really like the clips that are used on this. This is something that's been an Aborted staple for quite some time, but they definitely have used a number on this album as well. And I just overall love the feel and the tone of this album. I really feel like Aborted awakened a little bit on this disc, where they've really crafted something that's very solid. Is there that same memory factor as there were in albums such as Gormageddon, The Saw and the Carnage Done, or The Acrylic Abattoir? I really don't know if the feel is quite the same. I really don't. I don't know if we're really entering into that type of genius territory, at least in my opinion. However, I do feel that this is a strong album, and one that certainly is going to move a lot of heads. It's definitely going to turn a lot of heads, should I say, and really it's going to encourage a lot of individuals to scope out this one, not to mention the myriad of others within their discography. This is going to be a great introduction point for a lot of people, for almost like a new generation of fans, people who are perhaps always been a little bit fearful to enter into the death grind industry, or maybe just the grind industry in general, or even just the death metal industry in general. This is going to be a great ushering point, and so a lot of users and a lot of fans can get very used to the style that's incorporated here. There's enough of a real mixture here. There's enough of a real, smorgasbord here, where they're going to get a very nice sampling of what the palette really is all about, and they're going to get a really nice dabbling into what both of the genres are all about. There's going to be that raw, shredded intensity that you hear in a grind album, while at the same time also having that deep gluttural sensation that you hear so often in death metal, and that's the reason why this combined effort, this death grind idea, really is something that works in Aborted's favor as opposed to being something that's disadvantageous to them. Now, some people will also argue that these guys have started to veer off a little bit more toward the deathcore scene, and whoever said that is pretty dumb. Mainly because whenever you listen to this album, it's the last thing that you really think about. It's the last thing that really comes to mind, and it's really the way in which the songs themselves are constructed. Not to mention, it's also in the way in which the tonal quality of the tracks and the overall body is really constructed. The flow on this is fantastic. This is not something that is absolutely 100% required to have breakdowns in order for it to move from one track to the other, or even to have one track move from one portion to the next. This is something that flows together very nicely, mainly because it's one whose pace does not necessarily slow down very long for very often on this album. It's something where they maintain that pace in such a way where it all goes together very nicely. You know, most of these tracks, you're looking at tracks anywhere between 1.5 to 3.5 minutes in length, and then you hit the very last track, Cenobites, and you're talking about 5 minutes and 28 seconds, and you start to realize that Aborted, if they really wanted to, and they've done this before, this is not a new thing. Aborted could easily write something with some significant length to it, and it still is going to maintain itself as a very, very interesting track. Not to mention one that has a lot more technical quality to it, a lot of more precise idea building involved within it. And so that's something that really makes a track like Cenobites, which really has a length that's really extended compared to the songs on the remainder of the album, really comes forth as a real mesmerizing point, as a real center point, something that really is very, very important for the overall quality and score of the disc. Because if you do this one experiment, and it kind of falls flat, then it really showcases that you have only abilities within a certain scope. But if it goes well, such as with Cenobites, then it really showcases that you have another tool in your toolbox that you're able to use, another perhaps instrument in which you can use to cut into the cadaver of music. Certainly an interesting way of looking at things. I'd give this album an 85 out of 100. I really, really enjoyed it. This is a very, very nice album flow-wise, where you're not going to feel as though you are slowed down at all by any weak tracks. This is something where everything satisfies, and it definitely grants the listener exactly the experience that perhaps they were really looking for and hoping for with this album. I know that some people have really, really been on the high horse with this disc, and I can kind of see why. It certainly has the solidarity that's required to be definitely a catalyst disc to bring a lot of people on board into the death and grindcore genres. So I certainly hope that that is the result of this. What did you guys think of the NECROTIC Manifesto by Aborted? What did you guys think about this album? What are your overall thoughts on the band in general? And of course, if you like this video and want to see more like it, subscribe. We just hit 20K, huge accomplishment. I thank all of you for that. Please come on board and we'll talk about music. I'll talk to you guys later.